My name is Anna. I live with my husband David and our little girl Emily. She is 4 years old and full of life. We live in a quiet neighborhood in Texas. David runs a small business and I stay home with Emily. Life is simple, but we are happy. It was a warm Friday evening. The sun was going down and the sky looked soft and orange. We were having dinner at my father-in-law's house. After dinner, someone wanted dessert. David said, "Let's go out for tea and something sweet." Everyone agreed. There is a new place near our home called Neon Square. We had been there once before on a special night. It was nice, with small shops and lights. Emily remembered it too. As we got ready to leave, she asked, "Daddy, can we take the bike this time? Not the car?" She smiled and held his hand. David looked at me. I smiled and said, "Why not?" It was a short ride, and the weather was good. David started the bike. Emily sat in front of him, and I sat in the back to keep her safe. The rest of our family took the cars. We followed behind them. Emily laughed as the wind touched her face. "This is fun!" she shouted. We reached Neon Square in 10 minutes. There was a parking gate with a guard. David showed his hand, ready to pay. The guard looked at us and said nothing. We thought it was okay. Then we waited at the second barrier. That's when it happened. A man walked over. He wore a white shirt and dark pants. His beard was short. He looked at us and said in a cold voice, "Park your bike at the side. You can't go inside." David was confused. "Why not?" he asked. The man pointed at our feet. "Because of your slippers. And look at your bike," he said. I looked at our shoes. David had on brown leather slippers. I wore clean sandals. Emily wore her pink Crocs. Everything was clean. Nothing was strange. "What do you mean?" I asked. "This place is for VVIPs, the man said. "Not for people like you." I felt quiet. David also didn't speak. We looked at each other. Then I said, "We came here before. We even came on a busy night. No one stopped us." The man smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "It's different now," he said. I looked around. Other people were walking inside. Many were also wearing slippers. "Look," I said, pointing. "They have slippers too. Why didn't you stop them?" He didn't answer. He just looked at us again like we were small. Emily was quiet now. She looked up at us. "Can we go in, Mama?" she asked. My heart broke a little. This was not right. After a minute, another guard came. He spoke to the man. Then he looked at us and said, "You can go inside." He opened the barrier. We drove in slowly. The lights inside were bright. People were laughing and eating. But we didn't feel happy. We felt small, like we had done something wrong. We found a place to sit. David was still quiet. Emily asked, "Mama, did we do something bad?" I shook my head. No, baby. You did nothing wrong. But I wanted to cry. David looked at me. What if we were really poor? He said. Would they still treat us this way? I didn't know what to say. We had money. We owned a home. We helped people. But none of that mattered to that man. He only saw a bike and slippers. I stood up and went to the counter. Can I speak to the manager? I asked. A woman came. I told her what happened. I told her how we were stopped, how we were spoken to, and how we felt. The woman looked sorry. I'll speak to him, she said. A few minutes later, the man came back. He looked at me and said, sorry. But he didn't mean it. His face still had that same smile, the one that said, you're not welcome here. I went back to our table. David said, let's just finish and go. I agreed. Emily ate her ice cream, but she was quiet. We didn't stay long. We got on the bike and rode home. The night air was cool now. Emily fell asleep on my lap after we reached home. Later, David sat in the living room. It was just a cup of tea, he said. But they made it feel like we didn't belong. I nodded. I thought about that man's words. Not for people like you. What does that even mean? What kind of people? People who ride bikes? People who wear sandals? People who don't act rich? We built our life here. We pay our taxes. We give to the poor. We work hard. And yet, we were judged. I looked at David. Maybe we should speak up, I said. He looked surprised. You want to post about it? Yes, I said. Not to fight, but to tell the truth. That night, I wrote about our visit. I told people what happened. I said we were not asking for sympathy. We just wanted to be treated like humans. No child should have to ask, did we do something bad? No father should feel small in front of his family. And no one should hear, you're not welcome here, because of shoes or a bike. The next morning we woke up to many messages. Friends, neighbors, even strangers wrote back. They said they had felt the same. They shared their own stories. David looked at me and smiled. You were right, he said. We needed to speak. That day, I made tea at home. We sat on the porch and watched Emily play. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because we had money, not because we lived in a nice area, but because we had the courage to speak. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. 2 days later, David got a call from one of his friends. Hey, the man said. I saw your wife's post. That was hard to read. I'm sorry you went through that. David thanked him. Then the man said something strange. You know, he said, you should have just worn better shoes. David looked at me after the call. So now it's our fault, he asked. I didn't know what to say. People don't always understand. Some think this story was about shoes, but it wasn't. It was about respect. It was about how people treat others based on how they look or what they ride. Later that week, I had to go to the store. I took Emily with me. She held my hand and looked up at me. "Mama," she said, "do you think that man was sad?" I looked down at her. "What man?" I asked. "The one at the gate," she said. "Was he sad inside?" I didn't know how to answer. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe people say mean things when they are not happy with their life." Emily thought for a second and said, "I hope he gets better. I hope he learns to be nice." That evening we visited my parents. My father listened to our story and shook his head. "This isn't the world I wanted for my granddaughter," he said. My mother looked at me and asked, "What will you do next?" I didn't know. "Maybe nothing," I said. "Maybe we just move on." But later that night, something happened. I got a message from a woman I didn't know. She wrote, "Thank you. My son faced the same thing last year at a mall. He was wearing slippers too. They asked him to leave." Then more messages came. A man said he was stopped at a nice hotel because of his car. Another woman said she was not allowed into a store because of her dress. The stories were different, but the pain was the same. It was not just about tea or shoes. It was about people forgetting how to be kind. David sat next to me on the couch. "You see," he said, "this is bigger than us." I nodded. "I just don't want to fight with anyone," I said. "I just want people to stop thinking they're better than others." He smiled. "Then say that. Just keep telling the truth." The next day we walked to a small park with Emily. It was quiet and sunny. Emily ran around with other kids. I watched her laugh and play. She didn't care about clothes or shoes. She didn't care about bikes or cars. She just wanted to play. A woman sat next to me on the bench. She looked over and said, "I saw your story." I was surprised. "Oh?" I said. She nodded. "Yes, my husband and I go to that same place, but we never go on the bike. Now I see what might happen if we did." We talked for a while. She was kind. Before she left, she said, "You spoke for more people than you know." I told David about her. He smiled and said, "You're making people think. That's important." That evening, we got a message from the management of Neon Square. They said they were sorry for what happened. They said they would train their staff. They said everyone was welcome, no matter what they wear or ride. David showed me the message. "Do you believe them?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe. Maybe not. But it's a start." The next weekend, we went out again. This time, we didn't go to Neon Square. We went to a small coffee shop downtown. It was quiet and cozy. No bright lights, no big gates, No barriers. The man at the door smiled at us. "Welcome," he said. "Come in." We found a seat by the window. Emily picked a cookie from the counter. David ordered tea. I sat and looked around. People were laughing. Some wore sneakers. Some wore sandals. Some looked rich. Some looked simple. But everyone was treated the same. David looked at me. "I like this place," he said. "Me too," I replied. Later, Emily looked out the window and said, "Mama, this place is nice. No one here is mean." I smiled and kissed her head. "Yes, sweetie. That's how it should be." After we finished, we walked back to the car. I felt light, not because of the tea, not because of the weather, but because I knew we were heard, and not just by strangers. Even our little girl saw the difference. At night, David and I sat outside. The stars were out. Emily was asleep. David said, "You know, I was angry that night, but now I feel different." "How?" I asked. "Proud," he said. "You didn't stay quiet. You told the truth." I smiled. "I did it for Emily," I said. "And for people like us." He nodded. "For people who are kind, but don't wear the right shoes." We laughed. It was a small joke, but it meant something. The next morning, I saw Emily drawing. She made a picture of a family on a bike. They were smiling. Above them, she wrote with her little hands, "Be nice to all." 2 weeks had passed since that night. Life went back to normal, but something inside me had changed. I still took Emily to the park. I still cooked dinner every evening. David still went to work. But I saw things differently now. I noticed how people looked at each other in shops and restaurants. I listened more closely to what people said when they thought no one was listening. The world had not changed, but my eyes had. One morning, I took Emily to the library. She liked to look at picture books. I sat on a chair near her and watched other families. One mother was helping her son find a book about animals. Another man was showing his little girl how to use the computer. Everyone looked different. Some wore jeans, some wore shorts, some wore clothes that looked very expensive. But here, it didn't matter. No one looked at shoes. No one cared about bikes or cars. That made me feel peaceful. I thought about that night at Neon Square. It was just one evening, one moment. But it left a deep mark. I remembered how Emily looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something bad?" I kept hearing that question in my mind. I didn't want my child to feel less than others. Not ever again. Later that week, I saw a post online. A woman had shared her own story. She had been turned away from a fancy clothing store because they said her dress was too simple. Another man wrote about being ignored at a restaurant because he came alone and didn't look rich. The stories were different, but the message was the same. People were being judged for the wrong reasons. I realized my story had started a quiet wave. People were sharing their truth, not to complain, but to feel heard. They wanted respect. I started replying to some of them. I didn't give advice. I just listened. Sometimes that was all a person needed. One afternoon, I was walking back from the pharmacy. An older woman stopped me near the corner. She looked at me with kind eyes. "I know you," she said. "You're the woman who wrote about the tea place." I smiled and said yes. She held my hand and said, "You gave us words." "Thank you." Then she walked away. That moment stayed with me. I never thought a short visit for dessert would lead to this. I had no plan, no voice ready to speak. But the moment forced it out of me, and now people were listening. One night, David and I sat in the backyard after dinner. Emily was asleep. The air was still. The sky was full of stars. I told him what the old woman said. He looked thoughtful. He said it was good that people were talking, but he also said something else. He said we had to move forward, not stay angry, not let one man's words shape our view of everything. I agreed. I didn't want to live with anger. I wanted to live with purpose. I wanted Emily to grow up knowing her mother spoke when it mattered, but also moved on when it was time. The next day, I opened a folder on my computer and started writing. I wrote about respect, about judgment, about small acts of cruelty that people don't always see. I didn't use hard words or long ideas. I kept it simple. I wrote for people like me, people who just want to live with peace and dignity. I didn't know if anyone would read it, but it felt good to write. Soon after, someone from a small magazine wrote to me. They had seen my post and the stories I replied to. They asked if they could use my words in a short article. I said yes. They didn't pay me. I didn't ask. I only said, "Please keep it simple. This is for everyday people." A week later, the article was out. It was short, just one page, but it spoke clearly. People read it. Some shared it. Some kept quiet, but still felt something inside. My neighbor came over the next day with flowers. She didn't say much, but she gave me a hug. I understood what it meant. Emily continued to play, learn, and ask big questions. One morning she said, "Mama, do rich people always get to go first?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. I said, "No, sweetie. Not if we all speak up and treat each other kindly." She smiled and went back to coloring. I started thinking about doing something in our town. Something small, but real. I went to the local school and asked if I could talk to some parents. Not to teach, just to share. The principal said yes. So one Friday evening, a few mothers and fathers came to a small room near the gym. We sat on plastic chairs. I told them about Neon Square, but not just the story. I told them about how it made me look at the world differently. I talked about how many people feel invisible, not because they are, but because others choose not to see them. We didn't cry. We didn't shout. We just talked. We shared. After the meeting, one father came up to me. He said his daughter once asked to leave a store because a man made fun of her shoes. "I didn't do anything that day," he said. "But now, maybe I will next time." That evening, as I put Emily to bed, she asked, "Did you help people again today, Mama?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. Maybe just a little. Spring turned into summer. The world was still busy, still full of its problems, but I felt more grounded. I still cooked dinner. I still folded laundry, but something in my heart felt stronger. Neon Square never called again. We didn't visit, not because we were afraid, but because we found other places. We found places with open doors and open hearts. I started walking more. Sometimes I saw the same old man on the bench. I always waved. One time, I brought him a bottle of water. He smiled and said, "Still spreading kindness?" I nodded. "Trying," I said. On a Sunday morning, we went to a new bakery. It was small and simple. The woman behind the counter smiled at everyone. She gave Emily a cookie for free. David said, "This place feels good." I agreed. As we sat outside drinking tea, I looked around. People passed by. Some were dressed well. Some were not. But no one looked at anyone with judgment. There was no guard, no barrier, no one asking what shoes you wore or what you drove. Just people, just moments, just peace. That was all we ever wanted. Because we believed that a family, no matter how they look, no matter how they travel, deserves respect. And because we knew dignity should never come with a price tag. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon. My name is Zoe. I am 17 years old. I live in a small town called Newport. I go to school in the morning. In the evening, I go to the theater. I like to act in plays. I like to stand on the stage. I feel strong when I act. I feel happy too. We have a small group. It is called the Newport Players. We do 6 plays every year. I am in many of them. Some plays are fun. Some are sad. But I love all of them. I feel free when I act. I feel like someone new. Last week we did a big play. It was called Romeo and Juliet. It is a love story. Many people know this play. I did not play Juliet. I played her mother. It was not a big role, but I liked it. I wore a long dress. I used a soft voice. I looked like a mother. I worked very hard for this part. I read my lines again and again. I stood tall on the stage. I smiled at the girl who played Juliet. I looked at her like a real mother. I wanted people to believe me. I wanted them to feel the story. I wanted them to say, "Yes, she is good." The play was on Thursday night. The small theater was full. People came with their friends. Some came with family. The lights went out. The show began. I felt a little scared, but I took a deep breath. I smiled and started my part. I remembered every word. When the play ended, people clapped. I felt so good. I walked home with my friend Annie. She said, "You did very well." I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "I hope other people liked it too." The next day, Annie called me. She said, "Zoe, the newspaper is out." She meant the Newport Weekly News. "There is a review of the play," she said. "Do you want to see it?" I said yes. I was excited. I went to meet Annie at the cafe. We sat near the window. She had the paper in her hand. She opened it to the page. "Look," she said. "Here it is." I looked at the page. I saw a picture of the play. Then I saw the words. It said, "Zoe Baker plays Juliet's mother. She has a pretty face. She speaks her words well. But she is a young girl in an older woman's dress. And we all know it. She cannot make us believe anything else." I did not move. I looked at the page again. My face felt hot. My hands felt cold. My heart was fast. I did not smile. He said, "I have a pretty face," I said. "That's it?" Annie looked at me. "He is a student," she said. "He writes for the paper sometimes. His aunt is the editor. His name is Mike Morrison." "Mike Morrison," I said. "I don't know him, and he doesn't know me," Annie said. "Don't worry about it. You did well." But I did not feel okay. I went home and sat on my bed. I read the review again. She is a young girl in an older woman's dress. He did not see my acting. He only saw my face. He only saw my age. I looked in the mirror. I was a young girl. That was true. But I worked hard. I read every line. I used the right voice. I wore the right clothes. I did all I could. He did not say that. He did not care. I closed my eyes. I tried not to cry. But the words stayed in my head. That night I could not sleep. I thought about the play. I thought about Mike Morrison. I thought about the words. She has a pretty face. Was that all I was? On Tuesday, I met Annie again. We sat at the same cafe. We talked about school. Then a boy came in. He sat at a table near us. He had short brown hair. He had a pen in his hand. "Who is that?" I asked. Annie looked. She smiled. "That is Mike." "Mike Morrison?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "That's him." I looked at him. He looked like a normal boy. He looked calm. He was not tall. He had a soft smile. I felt something in my chest. I felt heat in my face. "That's the boy who wrote the review?" I asked. Yes, Annie said. I looked at him again. I wanted to walk to his table. I wanted to say, "You are wrong," but I did not move. Annie looked at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. I said, "No. I want to talk to him, but I also want to do something else." "What do you mean?" Annie asked. "I have an idea," I said. "Does he come here often?" "Yes," Annie said. "He comes here every Tuesday and Thursday." I smiled. "Good. Why is that good?" Annie asked. "Because I want to act again," I said. Annie looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I will not tell you now," I said. "But I have a plan." That night, I sat in my room. I did not cry. I thought hard. I looked in my closet. I took out a wig. It was black. I had glasses too. I put them on. I looked in the mirror. "Can he see it as me?" I asked myself. The next day, I saw Mike again. I stayed far away. I watched him walk. I watched how he sat. I watched how he looked at people. I took notes in my mind. I was going to act again. But this time, it was not on stage. This time, I was going to act in real life. I was going to play a new role. I was not Zoe. I was someone else. I wanted to show him I can be someone new. I wanted to prove something. He said I was just a young girl. But I was more than that. I was strong. I could change. I could be anything. He did not believe me before, but he will believe me now. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. I did not cry about the review anymore, but I could not forget it. I wanted to show him I was not just a girl in a dress. I wanted to prove that I could act, not on stage, but in real life. I told Annie my plan. At first, she did not understand. Then she laughed. But I was not joking. I went to my closet and took out a black wig. It was short and neat. I also found big glasses. When I wore them, I looked different. I did not look like myself. My eyes looked smaller. My hair looked dark. I put on a long gray coat and flat shoes. I looked like a grown woman, not a student. I was not Zoe anymore. I was someone else now. My name was Kate Lawson. Kate was smart. Kate was strong. Kate worked for a magazine. I made up the name of the magazine too. It was called Yes. It sounded like a real one. People read it in waiting rooms and buses. I took one old magazine from home and used it for the trick. I walked into the cafe on Thursday. Mike was there, just like Annie said. He sat at a small table with coffee and a book. He looked calm. He did not know me. Not like this. I walked to his table and asked if he was Mike Morrison. He looked up and said yes. I smiled and asked if I could sit with him. He said, okay. My heart was fast, but I spoke slow and clear. I told him my name was Kate Lawson. I said I worked for Yes magazine. I said I read his review in the Newport Weekly, and I liked how he wrote. His face looked proud, but he tried to hide it. Then I said I wanted him to do something for the magazine. I told him it was a big chance. He asked what it was. I said I wanted him to do an interview. The person he had to talk to was Todd Marone. His face changed when he heard the name. He said, "Todd Marone never speaks to anyone. He hates magazines." I smiled and said, "That is why this is special. If you get him to talk, you will be the first." Mike looked unsure. He said, "I want to write plays, not interviews." I looked him in the eye and said, "Then talk to him. Ask about writing. He may help you." Mike looked at the magazine on the table. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. He said, okay. I told him to go the next morning. I said, "Don't tell him about the magazine at first. Just talk." Mike smiled. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." I smiled too, but my smile was different. I was not happy. I was ready. The next morning, I left home early. I followed Mike to Todd Marin's house. He lived near the woods in a quiet street. His house was big, with dark trees and high walls. I stood behind a bush. I wore the wig and glasses again. I wanted to see what would happen. Mike stood at the door for a while. When the door opened, I saw Todd. He was tall and wore black clothes. Mike spoke fast. I could not hear them, but I watched. After a minute, Todd moved to the side. Mike walked in. The door closed. I stayed behind the bush. I waited. I thought it would be 10 minutes, maybe 20. I thought Mike would come out soon and Todd would be angry. I thought Mike would be red in the face. I wanted to see that. But time passed. 1 hour went by, then more. The house was still quiet. No one came out. I sat on the cold ground. My feet were cold. My coat was too thin. Still, I waited. After some time, the door opened. Mike came out. Todd was with him. They were smiling. They shook hands. Todd looked happy. Mike looked proud. I stood up slowly. I could not believe it. I stepped out from behind the bush. Mike saw me. His face changed. He stopped walking. I walked to him and took off the glasses. Then I took off the wig. His mouth opened a little. "You?" he said. I said yes. I told him my real name. "I'm Zoe," I said. "I just wanted to show you something." He looked down for a second. Then he laughed. "You tricked me," he said. "You were good." I said, "I had to act. I had to prove that I can do more than stand in a dress. I can play any part." Mike said, "You are a good actress. You really are." He told me Todd liked his idea for a play. Todd wanted to read more. I said, "That's great." But inside, I still felt a little fire. I did not act to help him. I acted to show him. But now, maybe both things happened. He saw my skill, and he got something good too. Mike said, "Thank you. You helped me." I said nothing. I smiled. He asked, "Can I buy you a coffee?" I said yes. "Only if I can wear my real hair," I said. He laughed again. "Deal," he said. We walked back to the cafe together. My hands were still cold, but I felt warm inside. Not because he smiled at me, not because he liked my acting, but because I knew I could do something hard. I made a plan. I did not give up. I made him see me as I really was. The next day felt strange. I woke up and looked in the mirror. My face was my own again. No wig. No glasses. Just me. But something had changed. I did not feel small anymore. I did not feel like just a girl in a dress. I felt strong. I met Annie at the cafe. She was already there. She had 2 cups of coffee on the table. I sat down and smiled. She looked at me and said, "So? How did it go?" I told her everything. I told her about the wig. I told her about the magazine story. I told her how Mike believed it all. I told her how he spoke to Todd Marin. She laughed and covered her mouth. "You really did that?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And it worked." Annie looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "You are amazing." I smiled again. But deep inside, I still felt something. Not pain, not anger, just a little question. Why did his words hurt me so much? Why did I care? I said I wanted to prove him wrong. And I did. He believed me. He said I was a good actress. But now, I wanted to know something else. I wanted to know if he was honest. The next week, the new newspaper came out. I saw it on Friday morning. I walked to the corner shop. I bought a copy and sat on a bench. I turned the pages slowly. My hands shook a little. I found the review. It was not about a play this time. It was about a visit to a writer's house. The title was simple, "A Morning with Todd Marone." The words were soft and kind. Mike wrote about his talk with the famous writer. He said Todd helped him. He said Todd listened to his ideas. Then I saw a short line near the end. It said, "Thanks to a brave young woman, I had this chance." She played a part so well, I believed every word. She is not just a pretty face. She is a real actress. I read that line twice. Then I closed the paper. My eyes felt warm. I looked at the trees around me. The wind was soft. I felt calm. Maybe I didn't need more than that. Maybe those words were enough. Later that day, Mike sent me a message. He asked if I wanted to meet. I said yes. We met in the park. The sun was out. It was not cold anymore. We walked slowly, without a plan. He talked about his play. He said it was about two young people who dream. He said Todd gave him ideas to make it better. I listened. I told him about my next play. I said I had a small role again, but I still wanted to do it well. He smiled and said, "I will come see it. And this time, I will write the truth." I looked at him and said, "You better." We both laughed. That evening, I sat at home and thought about the last 2 weeks. So many things had changed. I had felt angry, sad, and brave. I had made a plan. I had acted outside the stage. And now, I felt new. I remembered the girl who read the review. The girl who felt cold and small. She was still me, but she was also gone. I had learned something. I had learned that I can show who I am. I can be more than how I look. I can be more than my age. 2 weeks later, we had a new play at the theater. It was a funny one. I had 5 lines. That was all. But I said each one with heart. I looked at the crowd. I smiled. I saw Mike in the 3rd row. He was watching. And this time, he saw more than my face. After the play, he waited for me outside. He gave me a small paper. "Another review?" I asked. He said, "No. Just a note. For you." I read it when I got home. It said, "Every role you play is full of truth. You speak with heart. You act with soul. Never stop." I kept the note. I folded it and put it in my drawer. I read it again some days. Not because I needed praise, but because I liked the change. Mike and I did not become best friends. We talked sometimes. We shared coffee. We shared ideas. We laughed. But we were not a couple. We were just 2 young people who both wanted to be more. He wanted to write. I wanted to act. And we both learned that the world sees your face first, but not your whole self, not your voice, not your heart. You have to show them that part. Now, when I walk on stage, I feel calm. I know who I am. I know what I can do. People still call me young. They still say I have a pretty face. That's fine. I just smile. Because I know that's not all they'll remember. They will remember my voice, my part, my truth. And sometimes that is enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.